The world is changing. Global power dynamics are shifting. For decades, the West has held sway over international institutions. But now, a new block of nations is rising. They are demanding a greater say in how the world is run. The rise of Asia, Africa, and Latin America has created new centers of economic and political power. Countries like China, India, and Brazil are no longer content to be rule takers. They are becoming rule makers, demanding a seat at the table where global decisions are made. The old guard, accustomed to its privileged position, is reluctant to relinquish control. The result is a battle for influence, a contest to shape the future of global governance. BRICS. Challenging the status quo. At the forefront of this challenge is BRICS, a coalition of emerging economies. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, 5 nations with diverse cultures and histories. Together, these 5 nations represent over 40% of the world's population and a quarter of global GDP, making them a formidable force in the global economy. They are united by a common goal to reform global governance and create a more equitable world order, one that reflects the interests of developing nations. BRICS emerged as a formal grouping in the mid-2000s, during a period of rapid economic growth for its member states, which saw their influence on the world stage increase significantly. They saw an opportunity to leverage their combined economic weight to push for change on the global stage, advocating for a fairer distribution of power and resources. Their initial focus was on reforming international financial institutions, which they saw as biased in favor of Western countries and not reflective of the new economic realities. Over time, BRICS's agenda has expanded to include pressing global issues such as climate change, security, and trade, recognizing the interconnected nature of these challenges. They have also established their own institutions, such as the New Development Bank, as alternatives to the existing Western-dominated ones, aiming to provide more inclusive financial support. The challenge for BRICS and for the world is to manage this transition peacefully and constructively, ensuring that the shift in power dynamics leads to a more balanced and just global order. Please like and subscribe before we dive nitty-gritty. This will tremendously help us grow. Cracks in the foundation. The United Nations, founded in the aftermath of World War II, was intended to be a beacon of hope. But over time, cracks began to appear in the foundation of this noble institution. The Security Council, the organization's most powerful body, was granted the authority to make binding decisions. However, this power was concentrated in the hands of the 5 permanent members, the victors of World War II, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China. This imbalance of power has led to accusations of double standards and a lack of accountability. A chorus of discontent. The dissatisfaction with the UN structure and its perceived biases is not limited to the BRICS nations. Smaller nations, often marginalized in international affairs, have voiced concerns about their lack of representation and influence within the UN system. Developing countries argue that the UN's structure fails to reflect the realities of the 21st century. Even some Western nations have expressed reservations about certain aspects of the UN system, particularly its bureaucracy and inefficiency. The calls for change have taken various forms, ranging from modest proposals to overhaul the UN structure to more radical demands for its replacement with a new international body. The United Nations Security Council stands as a symbol of both hope and frustration. Tasked with maintaining international peace and security, it wields immense power. Yet its structure, a product of a bygone era, has become a lightning rod for criticism. 5 permanent members, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China, hold veto power, granting them the ability to block any resolution. Critics argue that this structure undermines the very principles of democracy and equality that the UN purports to uphold. This imbalance of power, BRICS nations argue, is particularly evident in the Council's handling of international crises. The calls for Security Council reform resonate deeply in Africa, a continent often on the front lines of global challenges. Despite its size, population, and growing economic clout, Africa finds itself with a diminished voice on the world stage. No African nation holds a permanent seat on the Security Council, a glaring omission that underscores the continent's marginalization. This lack of representation, African leaders argue, perpetuates a system where decisions about their continent are often made without their full participation or consent. The consequences of this exclusion, they contend, are far-reaching. The demand for African representation on the Security Council is about ensuring that the voices and perspectives of over 1.3 billion people are heard. The halls of global finance have long been dominated by Western institutions. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, created in the aftermath of World War II, have played a pivotal role in shaping the global economic order. But their structure, BRICS nations argue, reflects a bygone era, perpetuating imbalances that hinder the progress of developing countries. The IMF and World Bank allocate voting rights based on a country's economic size and financial contributions. This system has resulted in a concentration of power among wealthy nations, particularly those in the West. BRICS nations argue that their growing economic clout should be reflected in their ability to shape the rules of the global financial system. Beyond the realm of finance, BRICS nations have also raised concerns about what they perceive as double standards in the application of international law. They argue that Western countries often apply different sets of rules, holding developing nations to stricter standards while overlooking their own transgressions. This perceived hypocrisy, they contend, erodes trust in the international system and fuels resentment towards the West. They point to instances where Western intervention in foreign conflicts has been driven by strategic interests rather than humanitarian concerns. They call for a more consistent and even-handed approach to addressing human rights violations. The relationship between BRICS nations and the West has been marked by a mix of cooperation and competition. However, in recent years, geopolitical tensions have escalated, exposing deep-seated disagreements on a range of issues. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 sent shockwaves through the international system, further straining relations between BRICS and the West. While Western nations condemned the invasion and imposed sanctions on Russia, BRICS members have largely refrained from criticizing Moscow. This divergence reflects a broader shift in global power dynamics. BRICS nations, increasingly assertive on the world stage, are less willing to automatically align with Western positions. Climate change, a defining challenge of the 21st century, has become another arena where BRICS nations and the West find themselves at odds. While there is broad agreement on the need to address this global threat, deep divisions remain over responsibility and the pace of transition to a low-carbon economy. BRICS nations argue that Western countries bear a historical responsibility for climate change. They point out that developed nations have been the largest emitters of greenhouse gases for over a century. They argue that demanding developing countries make steep emissions cuts without providing adequate financial and technological support is unfair. They insist on a more equitable approach that takes into account their development needs and historical circumstances. As the limitations of the existing global order become increasingly apparent, BRICS nations are exploring the creation of alternative structures. One prominent proposal centers on expanding the UN Security Council to include permanent members from developing countries. This expansion would make the Council more representative of the current global landscape. Another idea involves strengthening regional organizations and empowering them to play a more prominent role in global governance. These regional organizations could serve as building blocks for a more decentralized and networked system of global governance. The recent expansion of BRICS to include countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and Argentina signals a growing desire among developing nations to forge their own path in global affairs. This move is seen as a significant step towards creating a more balanced global power structure, where the voices of developing countries are heard and respected. This expansion, dubbed BRICS+, has the potential to reshape the geopolitical landscape. By including these new members, BRICS is not only expanding its geographical reach, but also its economic and political influence. With the addition of these new members, BRICS now encompasses a wider range of political systems and economic models. This diversity is a strength, allowing the group to approach global issues from multiple perspectives and find innovative solutions. This diversity strengthens the group's collective bargaining power and its ability to project influence on a global scale. The combined economic and political clout of BRICS+ can challenge existing power structures and advocate for a more equitable world order. The new development bank, established by BRICS in 2014, has already begun to finance infrastructure projects in developing countries. These projects are crucial for the economic development and modernization of these nations, providing them with the necessary resources to grow and thrive. The rise of BRICS and the broader shift towards a multipolar world order will continue to shape the contours of global politics and economics for decades to come. This transformation represents a move away from a unipolar world dominated by a single superpower, towards a more balanced and inclusive global system. The BRICS alliance, with its call for a more equitable global order, stands at a crossroads. This coalition of emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has been advocating for a shift in the global power dynamics for years. Their challenge to the established Western-led system is undeniable, their ambitions clear. They seek to create a world where power is not concentrated in the hands of a few, but is more evenly distributed among nations. But the path ahead is fraught with uncertainty. The journey towards a multipolar world is complex and filled with potential pitfalls. Will their vision of a multipolar world lead to greater cooperation or heightened competition? The stakes are high, and the outcomes are far from guaranteed. The demand for reform within global governance structures is not merely a power grab by emerging economies. It is a call for a more balanced and fair system that reflects the realities of the modern world. It reflects a fundamental shift in the global landscape, a recognition that the institutions designed in the aftermath of World War II no longer adequately address the challenges of the 21st century. The world has evolved, and so must its governing bodies. The world has changed. The economic and political landscape is vastly different from what it was decades ago. Economic power is more evenly distributed. Countries that were once considered peripheral are now central to global trade and finance. New centers of innovation and influence are emerging. These nations are not just participants in the global economy. They are leaders in technology, science, and culture. Global challenges, from climate change to pandemics, require collective action and shared responsibility. No single nation can tackle these issues alone. The old order, with its entrenched hierarchies and imbalances of power, is struggling to adapt to this new reality. The calls for change are growing louder and more urgent. The BRICS alliance, despite its internal differences and competing interests, has emerged as a powerful voice for change. They are united in their desire to reshape the global order. Their push for greater representation, a fairer distribution of resources, and a more inclusive system of global governance resonates with many countries, particularly in the developing world. These nations see in BRICS a champion for their aspirations and needs. They offer an alternative vision, one where the voices of the marginalized are heard and the needs of the many are prioritized over the interests of the few. This vision is both inspiring and challenging. Whether this vision will translate into a more just and equitable world order remains to be seen. The journey is long and the obstacles are many. The BRICS alliance faces formidable obstacles, both internal and external. Their ability to navigate these challenges will be crucial. Their ability to overcome these challenges to forge a common purpose, and to engage constructively with the West will determine whether their quest for a new global order ushers in a new dawn or fades into a setting sun. The future of global governance hangs in the balance. There you go, folks. If you liked this video, click on the left to enjoy the next exciting one. Until then, keep supporting us by subscribing, and see you in the next one.